Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. The cruelest thing my partner did was sit beside me like I was nothing, hide her phone in the dark, and calmly reduce me to background in messages to the man she was betraying me with. Scheduling her exit like I was an inconvenience she could discard once the money cleared, while still coming home to my bed and letting me believe we were only going through a phase. Here's how it happened. The bitter taste of betrayal sat on my tongue at 2:17 a.m. in late November, when the heat clicked on and the vents answered with a tired rattle. Outside, a cold rain glazed the streets of Portland, Oregon, turning the neighborhood lights into smeared halos. My name is Nia Whitfield. I spent 10 years in the Marines before moving into corporate cybersecurity. Combat taught me how silence can warn you louder than shouting. In our bedroom, my wife faced the wall, shoulders stiff, phone glow pooling on her satin pillowcase like a secret. I knew her breathing the way you know your own address. Nia wasn't asleep. She held her breath in short. Control counts whenever she wanted me to believe she was exhausted. She also had a tell when she lied. She pressed the tip of her tongue against the inside of her cheek, then smoothed her hair twice, the same 2 strokes every time. That night, she did it without turning around. The screen brightness dipped, then flared again. Someone was still awake on the other end, and it did not work. If you ever felt that cold shift where the person you love starts moving like they're hiding something, stay with me. Because what I found was not just betrayal, it was a plan. Drop your city in the comments while you watch, because I want to know where you're listening from. 6 months earlier, I would have reached across the sheets, asked softly what was wrong, and tried to bring warmth back into the space between us. I would have used the name I used when I wanted her to laugh, and I would have believed her answer because believing felt like love. I did not move. I kept my hands folded against my chest and let discipline do the work emotion used to do. Quiet is not surrender. Quiet is control. In the dark, control was the only thing I still owned completely. I cleared my throat just enough to announce I was awake. Nia exhaled like my existence was a request for labor. "Darnell, I have a morning call," she said, voice clipped, the sound of the door closing without the courtesy of footsteps. No surprise, no affection, no question. The last 4 months have been like this. No touch, no lingering. She treated my hand on her shoulder like a spill on fresh clothes. The bed, once our refuge, had turned into a border nobody crossed without consequences. I got up, careful not to scrape the bed frame, and walked to the kitchen for water. The house was quiet except for the soft pulse of my smart home system, something I installed because systems behave when you design them properly. I kept my routines tight. A bottle of water, 2 minutes at the sink, then a slow look at the room before I sat. On the refrigerator, a calendar hung crooked, held by a magnet shaped like a lighthouse from our first road trip. Tomorrow's square should have mattered. It was the anniversary of our first date, 8 years ago, when I took her to a small Italian spot near the waterfront in Baltimore's Inner Harbor, before our jobs carried us west. She wore a red scarf and laughed so easily I remember thinking happiness had a sound. That date is not circled now. Either she forgot or she did not care. I sat at the kitchen table, the chair leg steady on the tile, and let my brain do what it always does when a pattern breaks. Measure, compare, and refuse denial. Morning came gray and thin, the kind of winter light that turns everything into a muted photograph. Nia moved to the bathroom as if she was alone, taking longer than usual, humming under her breath. She used to hum only when we cooked together, back when she danced in socks and stole bites from the cutting board. Now the sound was reserved for a different anticipation. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she snatched it with a speed that did not match casual confidence. Her eyes flicked, then she smiled once privately. "Client from the Atlanta office," she said when I asked, keeping my voice even as I sipped coffee. She delivered the lies smoothly, then touched her hair twice. My position gave me an inconvenient relationship with facts. Rivergate Energy had closed its Atlanta satellite suite 2 months ago during restructuring. There was no client there to call her at dawn. She kept smiling anyway, Designer blouse crisp, heels lined by the door, her scent sharper than her usual perfume. She looked polished, and it felt weaponized. After she left in the black SUV, she insisted matched her executive image. I sat in my home office and opened my laptop. I did not rage text. I did not pace. My mornings always began with a check of threat dashboards and network health, then a 5-minute journal entry to keep my head clear. That day, my entry was one line: do not move without proof. In cybersecurity, you never accuse a system of compromise without logs. In marriage, the rules should be the same, even when it hurts. As Director of Security Operations at Rivergate, I had legitimate access to compliance metadata. I started with the basics: location pings tied to company devices. Officially, Nia's phone spent its days at headquarters in downtown Portland or at home. On the surface, it looked perfect, but devices whisper even when people swear they do not. I pulled cellular handshake histories and compared them with Wi-Fi association logs. A second pattern appeared, small at first, then undeniable. Twice a week, her phone lit up near the Pearl District, close to a boutique hotel. The hotel was a Harborlight Suites, known for discretion, and valet attendants who never made eye contact. The visits aligned with miles I had noticed on her odometer, extra distance she brushed off as errands. I cross-checked dates against her calendar entries: vendor meeting, board prep, late training. Each one matched a Harborlight tower. Then I checked our joint card statements. Oysters, champagne, and dessert she once mocked as overpriced. She used to say oysters tasted like seawater with an attitude. The receipts suggested someone else had been ordering, and she followed along willingly. Evidence piles quietly, like snow in a storm you underestimate. Her new gym membership, the upgraded wardrobe, the way she started calling me Darnell instead of Nell, the name that belonged to our early years, the way she stopped leaving her phone face up on the counter. Every change was small enough to excuse, but together they built a wall. I kept my face neutral when she talked about strategic priorities over dinner. I asked the right questions gently, then stored her answers like logs in an incident report. One Thursday night, I stayed late at headquarters, using the server room's calm hum as cover. Nobody questioned it. Security leads always had reasons. I accessed corporate device communication metadata under compliance authority. I was not hunting content for curiosity. I was looking for relationships that did not belong. Nia's contact saved as HR hotline appeared too often. At hours HR does not operate. The number was not HR. It belonged to Sterling Voss, our chief financial officer, a man who wore confidence like a tailor coat and expected rooms to part for him. Sterling was married, 2 kids, a charity gala spouse who smiled through photographs like she practiced. At work, he was the kind of executive who laughed a beat too late, as if checking whether his joke landed. I pulled the message chain associated with that number. It began with budgets, marketing allocations, and quarter projections. It shifted the way affairs often shift. One joke, one "Are you still awake?" One line that crossed a boundary and never returned. The tone turned intimate, then reckless. I felt my pulse slow, not because I was calm, but because my body braced for impact. The line that cracked something inside me wasn't romantic. It was logistical. 3 weeks earlier, Nia wrote, "More won't notice. We can push another $60K to the vendor file before month end." Sterling replied, "What about your quiet husband?" She answered, "He's background. He will never connect it. Once bonus is clear, I'm done playing house." Background. The word landed like a stamp. I had loved her through deployments, through moves, through dull stretches. In her private calculus, I was scenery. My marriage was an expense line to manage until she cashed out. I sat alone, screen reflecting in the glass of the server rack, and let the truth settle. I did not punch a wall. I did not call her. My training had burned one principle into my bones: collect, verify, contain, then act. I started an evidence folder with redundant backups. I documented timestamps, hashes, and access paths the way I would for any internal investigation. If anyone questioned how I found it, I wanted clean explanations. I wanted her lies to collapse under their own weight, not under my emotion. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the role she expected. Mild, agreeable, present enough to avoid suspicion. I left for work at 6:40, stopped for coffee at a small shop on Nia, Alberta, and walked 2 loops around the block before meetings when stress tightened my chest. I cooked dinner twice a week because it kept my hands busy and my mind steady. I brought her flowers on our anniversary and watched her accept them like a package she did not order. She checked her phone within 30 seconds. Relief flickered in her eyes when I did not press. One evening, she came home late, claiming a marathon call with a West Coast partner team. I made lemon garlic pasta from scratch because cooking had been my language long, before I learned to speak love out loud. She pushed noodles around her plate with the focus of someone hiding boredom. "This is nice," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You did not have to." I answered, "It matters to me," and waited for guilt. None arrived. She excused herself for a quick conference call and closed the office door. Laughter seeped into the hallway in soft bursts, casual and warm, meant for someone else. The next morning, her coat pocket held a receipt she forgot to shred. Dinner for 2 at a downtown spot called Montclair Oyster Bar. Champagne, oysters, and a shared dessert. The date printed at the top was our anniversary night. She had not forgotten. She had chosen. I folded the paper once, then twice, and filed it. My hands did not shake. The numbness was worse. It meant my heart had already begun protecting itself by shutting doors I did not know existed. I went to work and smiled at co-workers, careful and polite, while my life reorganized silently inside me. Fraud was the second thread, and it was easier to track than betrayal. Money leaves prints. I followed vendor payments tied to marketing campaigns Nia managed. A shell consultancy appeared repeatedly, billed for creative placement and regional activation. The invoices were slightly inflated, not enough to trigger routine flags, but consistent enough to form a pattern. I traced ownership records and found a registered agent in Wilmington, then a mailbox address in Tampa. Behind it, an account Sterling controlled. A second shared account connected to Nia. Over 18 months, the skim total reached $2.2 million. They were not geniuses. They were greedy. Then I found career sabotage. Emails showed Nia forwarding confidential candidate evaluations to Sterling, handing him leverage to undercut rivals. A project lead named Marcus Ellison lost a promotion after his metrics were quietly reframed as risk. A VP candidate, Alana Price, saw her initiative defunded after rumors about poor stakeholder management circulated from anonymous notes Nia ghostwrote. These were good people who work hard and trusted the process. Nia treated them like obstacles. Her ambition had stopped being ambition and turned into appetite. The more I learned, the less I recognized a woman who once cried during sad movies and apologized to strangers she bumped into in grocery aisles. The person who could end this was Lionel Moore, Rivergate's founder and CEO. He was not old money. He was stubborn money, the kind built from nothing and guarded like a family heirloom. Lionel still walked factory floors in a simple jacket and remembered names from years ago. He valued loyalty, but he valued integrity more. People feared him not because he yelled, but because he paid attention. I requested 15 minutes on his calendar with a bland subject line, Internal Security Review. He approved it within an hour. My stomach tightened, not from fear of him, but from the finality of what I was about to set in motion. Lionel's office sat high above the river, glass walls framing the city. He looked up as I entered, eyebrows raised. "Whitfield," he said, "you do not book time unless it matters." I placed a black folder on his desk. "It matters," I replied. I spoke cleanly. Shell company, inflated invoices, account transfers, internal communications. I gave him the numbers, then the proof. I did not mention my marriage at first. I described the scheme as a breach. Entry point, lateral movement, impact, and persistence. Lionel's face hardened with each page, like stone cooling. When I finally connected Sterling's account to my wife's access, Lionel's jaw tightened once. "Your wife," he said, not asking. "Yes," I answered, still legally. He studied me, searching for drama. My voice stayed even. I had no interest in spectacle for its own sake. Lionel leaned back, fingers steepled. They picked the wrong man to underestimate, he said. And they did in my house. He tapped the folder once, decisive. The Rivergate Foundation Gala is next Saturday. Board members, investors, press. We handle this publicly enough to end speculation, but clean enough to protect the company. You will coordinate security and evidence display with legal. No leaks until we choose. I nodded. The plan was in shape now. Shape meant inevitability. The week leading to the gala felt like living beside a train track, hearing the vibration before the headlights appeared. At home, Nia floated through days with a brightness I had not received in months. She mentioned a major announcement, eyes shining, and asked whether my tux still fit. She adjusted my collar with a familiarity that felt borrowed from an earlier version of us. Try to look sharp, she said. This night matters. I answered, I will not embarrass you, and meant it in ways she would not understand until too late. I slept in short stretches, then woke to do push-ups quietly, not for strength, but for steadiness. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Nia treated the day like a coronation. She booked a stylist on NW 23rd, got her nails done in a pale pearl color, and spent too long examining her reflection, tilting her head as if searching for the angle that made her seem untouchable. Her tell appeared again at breakfast, tongue to cheek, hair smoothed twice, then a cheerful lie about a committee call. I spent my morning reading the gala security run sheet, then doing a slow walk through my house, noting what would need changing after this. My therapist once called it pre-grief. I called it preparation. Nia chose a midnight blue gown that cost more than my first car. The price tag did not bother her. She cared about value, and value to her was whatever made people stare. She asked about earrings, holding up emeralds and then diamonds without looking at me. Emeralds, I said automatically. She chose diamonds anyway. They hold resale better, she told her mirror, satisfied. A small detail, but explained everything. She was not building a life with me. She was building assets. I drove separately to the venue because she wanted networking flexibility. I let her have it. The gala took place at the Grand Larkspur Hotel, a renovated landmark near the riverfront with chandeliers that glittered like frozen fireworks. Inside, the air smelled like champagne and expensive cologne. The crowd spoke in smooth tones, the language of people who rarely hear no. I checked in with security staff I had briefed earlier, confirming positions and timing. Nia entered behind me, posture perfect, smile practice. Within minutes, she moved through the room like she owned it, greeting board members, laughing at jokes that were not funny, and leaning close at just the right moments. She was charming in public the way some people are charming in courtrooms. Persuasive, strategic, and cold underneath. Sterling Voss stood near the stage, drink in hand, scanning the room like a man counting what belongs to him. His watch flashed under the lights. When he caught Nia's eye, he gave a subtle nod. She responded by touching her hair twice, her private signal, her familiar lie. Anyone else might miss it. I did not. I spent the cocktail hour speaking with managers, investors, and a few auditors who looked more alert than the rest. A woman from accounting, Renee Dalton, asked how I was doing in a tone that held careful concern. Busy, I said, and she nodded as if she understood that busy sometimes means surviving. Dinner was a parade of courses and wine pairings. I sat at a table with directors who talked about ski property in Vail and the merits of private aviation. Nia sat closer to the stage with Sterling and two executives who laughed too loudly at her stories. She glanced toward me once, quick, confirming I stayed in my assigned role. Then she turned back to her audience. Between courses, she guided conversations like chess, placing compliments, taking credit, and setting people into positions that benefited her. She had always been ambitious. I used to admire it. Now I could see what she traded for it: honesty, empathy, and the ability to sleep without rehearsing. Lionel Moore took the stage after dessert. The room quieted with the natural obedience money commands. Lionel smiled warmly, like a grandfather at a holiday gathering. Tonight is about transparency, he began, voice calm, and about the future we claim to build together. Nia leaned forward, excitement bright on her face. She had been telling herself a story in which she rose. I stayed small, and Sterling remained untouchable. Lionel gestured to the AV technician. The huge screen behind him lit up. Nia's breath caught. She expected her name in bold letters. Instead, a text conversation filled the room. Nia's face drained so quickly, it looked like someone turned off a light behind her eyes. Across the ballroom, Sterling's smile locked in place, then broke. On the screen, their words appeared in crisp font, time-stamped, impossible to explain away. More won't notice. Push another 60. Your quiet husband is the background. Bonus is clear, I'm done playing house. The room held its breath, a collective pause that made even the waiters stop moving. Lionel's tone stayed steady. These messages, he said, were exchanged between my chief financial officer and our marketing director while they defrauded this company and undermined its people. The screen changed the transaction records, invoice chains, account trails. A glass slipped and shattered somewhere, sharp as a gunshot. Then the surveillance footage rolled. The Harborlight Suites lobby. Sterling's hand placed low on Nia's back, the two of them laughing as they stepped into an elevator. No explicit content, no tabloid framing, just enough to erase deniability. Sterling shifted toward the exit. Two security guards moved into place, exactly where the plan required them. Nia grabbed my arm hard, nails pressing into fabric. "Darnell, do something," she hissed, panic scratching through her polished voice. "This is fake. This is a setup." I turned my head slowly and met her eyes. "I've verified every file," I said, loud enough for nearby ears. "None of it is fake." The moment her mind connected my calm to my control, her expression cracked. Shock turned to anger, then to fear. Lionel spoke again, now formal. "Sterling Voss and Nia Whitfield are terminated for cause, effective immediately. The matter has been referred to authorities waiting outside." Camera flashes erupted. Phones lifted. The room, once a stage Nia commanded, became a spotlight she could not escape. Sterling tried to speak, but security guided him with firm hands. Nia stood rigid, the gown suddenly ridiculous, a costume in a play she no longer directed. She stared at me like I had become a stranger. In a way, I had. "You did this," she said, voice tight. "I documented what you did." I answered. "You did the rest." I removed her hand from my sleeve gently, like clearing lint. Then I walked toward the exit. People parted, not because I demanded it, but because nobody wanted to be too close to the fire. Behind me, Nia's voice rose, pleading, accusing, bargaining. The sound faded as doors closed and cold air met my face. Outside, the night was clean and sharp. I inhaled deeply and felt not victory, but release, like unclenching a fist you forgot you were holding. The next 2 days were a storm of consequences. Sterling's attorney secured bail quickly, and Sterling's first strategy was cowardice. He issued a statement claiming he was manipulated, seduced, and compromised. He painted himself as an innocent executive led astray by a calculating subordinate. It was a familiar pattern. Powerful men rebrand their choices as accidents. The investigation did not care. The numbers did not care. Federal auditors became involved once offshore transfers surfaced. Nia's face appeared in headlines, framed as ambition gone rotten. Comment sections turned cruel, as they always do when strangers consume someone's worst moment for entertainment. I did not read them. I had enough voices in my head already. Rivergate froze Nia's company accounts before she left the hotel. Her corporate card stopped working at 10:06 p.m. Her car was flagged for repossession. She called friends who stopped answering, because association becomes a risk when scandal hits. I received messages too. Reporters asking for quotes, colleagues asking for my side, distant relatives offering opinions. I ignored most of it. My focus stayed narrow: legal protection, asset security, and emotional survival. I met with my attorney Monday morning on a street lined with bare trees in Selwood. We changed security codes, documented property ownership, and filed emergency motions based on spousal fraud. The practical work calmed me. It gave my hand something honest to do. Nia came home that night in the rain, standing outside my gate in a coat too thin for the cold, hair flattened, makeup streaked. I did not frame it as a scene. It was simply what happened. Pressure against the gate, then the doorbell, then a fist against wood. The camera feed showed her looking over her shoulder, hoping someone would rescue her or confirm she still mattered. Boxes out on the covered porch, taped and labeled, her belongings sorted with the careful detachment of someone packing evidence. The rain softened cardboard edges. She looked smaller than I remembered, but not innocent. There is a difference. When I opened the door, I stayed inside. Nia stepped forward, breath ragged. "Darnell, please," she said, reaching for my hands as if she could reinstall intimacy like an app. Her fingers trembled. This got out of control. Sterling pressured me. "We can explain it." She touched her cheek with her tongue, then smoothed her hair twice. Even now, even here, the reflex almost made me sad. "There is nothing to explain," I replied. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "You wrote what you meant. You acted on it. That is all." Her eyes widened, searching for the old me, the one she labeled the background. I handed her a manila envelope. Inside were divorce papers and a restraining order request. "Read them," I said. "You cannot stay here." Her face tightened, anger pushing through fear. "After everything I did for us, you threw me out?" The sentence was absurd, and she delivered it with real indignation, as if she believed sacrifice meant entitlement. I asked, "What did you do for us?" My tone stayed low. I did not raise my voice because volume would have given her power. "You lied. You stole. You plan an exit once bonuses cleared." Her jaw clenched. "I will ruin you in court," she snapped, venom sharp. "You can try," I answered, "but your finances are already evidence." The threat drained from her as reality settled. She looked down at the envelope, like it weighed more than paper. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, voice smaller, stripped of performance. That question used to trigger my protective instinct. That instinct was gone. "That is not my responsibility anymore," I said. I closed the door. The lock clicked with a clean finality that felt like an ending I had postponed too long. I leaned my forehead against the wood for one breath, then turned and walked into a house that felt both empty and calmer than it had in months. Silence can be cruel. Silence can also be peace. I poured a glass of bourbon and sat in my favorite chair, the one by the window that faced a maple tree. My hands finally shook, not from regret, but from adrenaline leaving my body. I waited for triumph. It did not come. What arrived was exhaustion, thick and heavy, the kind that follows sustained stress rather than a single event. I thought about how war teaches you to expect danger and corporate life teaches you to expect politics, but marriage betrayal teaches you to question your own judgment. I replayed small moments, searching for the first crack I ignored. I did not romanticize it. I needed accuracy, not nostalgia. Accuracy is how you heal without lying to yourself. Legal proceedings move slowly, the way systems do when they're designed to be thorough. Nia's attorney tried to paint her as a pressured employee and me as controlling, alleging I accessed private data out of jealousy. My counsel responded with documented authority scope and forensic verification. For every story her side offered, there was a log file and an audit trail. Depositions began. I answered questions with short, factual sentences. I did not speculate about motives. I did not insult her. I refused to perform grief for an audience. The fraud case expanded, pulling in outside contractors who had signed off on fake invoices. The government moved with quiet patience, building a case brick by brick. Reality does not need to shout. The hardest part was not court dates or paperwork. It was a routine disruption. Coming home and automatically reaching for my phone to share a small detail, then stopping. Hearing a song in the grocery store and remembering how she used to sing it off key to make me smile. Those moments were not dramatic. They were sharp. I started therapy twice a week because strength without processing turns into brittleness. I returned to my rituals. Morning run along the river, journal entry, then work. When anxiety pressed in, I cleaned not compulsively, but deliberately. Order in the physical space helped my mind remember it could be order too. I learned that healing is mostly repetition, not revelation. Sterling took a plea deal within 4 months. The agreement included prison time and restitution large enough to reduce his lifestyle to something closer to ordinary. His cooperation removed any plausible deniability from Nia. Sterling's wife filed for divorce quickly, and within weeks she sold her suburban house outside Beaverton and moved back east, closer to family. I did not feel satisfaction about her pain. She was not an enemy. She was collateral damage, and collateral damage is never a victory. It is simply a cost. When people pursue appetite over integrity, the bill arrives for everyone nearby. I understood that more clearly than ever. I ran into Sterling's wife once in a quiet coffee shop near my office. She recognized me first, offered a tight, polite smile, then asked if she could sit. Her name was Elise. She looked tired in a way makeup cannot hide. We spoke for 15 minutes. She said not knowing had been worse than the truth. Suspicion turns your house into a maze, she said, stirring her drink though she did not sip. At least now I can stop guessing. I told her she deserved steadier ground. She nodded like she wanted to believe it. When she left, I sat for a while, thinking about how many lives intersected with Nia's decisions and how far the ripples travel once they start. Lionel Moore called me into his office a month after the gala. I expected a conversation about boundaries, about access, about the risk I took exposing executives. Lionel offered a handshake instead. You handled it clean, he said. No unnecessary mess. No shortcuts. We need more of that. He proposed a security consulting subsidiary under Rivergate's umbrella, focused on internal fraud prevention and incident response. The offer was generous. I asked for time. My career had always been about threats outside the network. Now I have learned how often the threat sits inside the house. I was not sure I wanted to spend my future living in other people's betrayals. There is a cost to constant suspicion. I already carried enough. The divorce finalized in early May, on a bright morning when the courthouse steps felt warmer than expected. The judge moved efficiently once the fraud evidence entered record. Nia's attempt to claim half collapsed under her own messages and the financial trail. She kept personal items and walked away with debt and a damaged name. When I signed the final paper, I felt something loosen in my chest. It was not happiness. It was a relief, clean and understated. Outside, people moved through their day without noticing mine had changed forever. That anonymity was comforting. I drove home slowly, windows cracked, letting fresh air replace stale tension. At a red light, I realized my jaw was unclenched for the first time in months. I accepted Lionel's offer later that summer, not because I wanted revenge work, but because I wanted my skills to protect people who play by rules. The consulting unit built controls, trained teams, and audited systems before fraud became headlines. I worked long hours, but the work felt honest. At home, I started changing the space. I repainted walls Nia chose, replaced furniture that carried too many memories, and donated items bought with questionable money. I kept what was mine, my books, my tools, the old cast-iron skillet from my first apartment. The house began to feel like mine again, not a museum of compromise. I planted herbs in the backyard because tending something living reminded me I could still care without losing myself. Nia tried to reach me a year later through an intermediary because the restraining order remained active. She wanted to apologize. Allegedly, she wanted closure. The request landed in my inbox like an echo from a room I had already left. I did not respond. Anger was not the reason. Anger had burned down and left ash. The reason was simpler. There was nothing left between us that required maintenance. She could not rewrite what she did with a better sentence. An apology can acknowledge harm, but it cannot restore trust once trust has been used as a tool. I wished her no special suffering. I also offered her no access to my peace. Peace is expensive when you have to rebuild it from ruins. The last I heard, Nia found work at a small marketing firm outside Tucson, Arizona, under a supervisor who managed her tightly. She was rebuilding in quieter rooms with fewer chandeliers. Part of me hopes she learned something real, not because she deserves comfort, but because the world does not improve when people repeat the same damage. Still, hope is not an obligation. My nights grew steadier. I slept without listening to the phone glow. I stopped counting days. I returned to small pleasures. Saturday morning pancakes, long walks during light rain, jazz playing low while I cleaned the kitchen. A home can recover if the person inside it stops bracing for impact. Dating again required patience. I moved slowly, not from fear of women, but from respect for what trust demands. I paid attention to small details, whether someone kept their word, whether they apologized without excuses, whether they listened when the conversation was not about them. I met a woman named Marissa Grant at a community fundraiser for animal rescue. She was a veterinarian with laugh lines and the kind of direct honesty that made manipulation difficult. She had a habit of humming softly while thinking, as if ideas needed a soundtrack. When she disagreed, she said it plainly, not dramatically. Being with her felt uncomplicated, which did not mean easy, but it meant mutual. Sometimes I caught myself waiting for the hidden hook. With time, the waiting faded. I still carried flaws. I avoided confrontation for too long in my marriage because silence felt safer than conflict. I mistook stability for health. I believed love meant endurance, even when endurance became self-erasure. Therapy helped me name those patterns without self-hate. I learned that calm could be strength, but calm can also be avoided. The difference is whether you use it to protect yourself or to refuse reality. My journal entries changed from evidence-style notes to honest reflections. One morning I wrote, "I did not lose my marriage at the gala. I lost in the months I taught myself to accept coldness as normal." That line hurt, and it helped. The company moved on quickly, as corporations always do. Rivergate announced reforms, new compliance teams, and a renewed commitment to ethics. People who praised Nia's drive began claiming they always sent something off. It was revisionist, but predictable. I focused on what was real. The systems we built, the policies that reduced risk, the conversations that encouraged whistleblowing without fear. I trained teams to notice small anomalies early, because big disasters begin with tiny permissions. My work became a kind of translation, turning human behavior into safeguards that protect others from the consequences of unchecked appetite. The irony was not lost on me. I had not protected my own home soon enough, but I could help protect other people's livelihoods. That was not redemption. It was for a purpose. Some nights, I thought about the ballroom moment, trying to label what I felt. Not victory, not vengeance, mostly fatigue, and the strange calm that comes when uncertainty ends. People imagine exposure as a fireworks show. For me, it was more like a switch turning off. The constant hum of suspicion stopped. The question marks dissolved into periods. I understood then that truth is not always dramatic. Truth is often paperwork, timestamps, and a door that closes. When friends asked if it felt good, I answered honestly. It felt final. Finality is underrated. It gives you a line to stand behind. My relationship with Lionel changed too. He respected my restraint, and I respected his insistence that integrity is not a branding exercise. He reminded me of commanders who hate unnecessary noise. "Do your work," he told me once, "and let the evidence speak." That became my guiding principle beyond the office. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding. I stopped trying to win arguments with ghosts from my past. Nia had treated my quiet as weakness because she misunderstood what quiet can be. Quiet can be a decision to conserve strength for the moment that matters. I knew that now in a personal way. I also knew I did not want to live as a constant strategist in my own life. Planning is helpful. Living only in contingency is not. I took better care of my body, not as punishment, but as respect. Morning runs became longer, and I added a weekend boxing class because hitting a bag safely gave my anger a place to go when it surfaced. I learned to cook new dishes that did not remind me of our old routines. Jerk chicken with roasted vegetables, miso soup, cinnamon oatmeal. I hosted my brother and his kids sometimes, letting laughter return to rooms without echoing off old hurt. I fixed small things around the house myself. A squeaky hinge, a loose tile, a leaky faucet. Repairs were satisfying. They offered immediate results, unlike marriage, where effort does not guarantee safety. I also learned to accept that some questions do not have clean answers. Why did Nia change? Was she always that person, or did her environment sharpen something already there? The truth is, I may never know, And certainty is not required for closure. People do what they do, and then they explain it afterward in whatever language protects their ego. Nia's language was ambition. She used it like a shield. She told herself she was climbing. She was also talking. My job now was not to analyze her until I found a satisfying reason. My job was to protect my future from repeating my past. That meant honoring what happened without becoming it. When Rain returned to Portland, it did not feel like an accusation anymore. It felt like weather. I sat on my porch one evening with a warm mug, listening to drops hit the railing in a steady rhythm. The neighborhood was quiet, a few cars passing, distant music from a house down the block. I thought about how I used to fear silence because silence meant distance. Now silence meant rest. I could hear my own thoughts without bracing for someone else's deception. In my living room, the new paint colors softened the light. The old lighthouse magnet still held the calendar, but the squares ahead were not haunted by missing circles. They were just days, waiting to be used well. I remained careful at work, but I stopped carrying suspicion into every conversation. I learned to separate professional vigilance from personal paranoia. There is a difference between paying attention and expecting harm. Paying attention is healthy. Expecting harm is a prison. Marissa helped with that, not through speeches, but through consistency. She showed up when she said she would. She asked questions without traps. She laughed when something was funny and looked concerned when something hurt. That steadiness did more for me than any dramatic declaration could have. I realized I had been starving for simple reliability. I used to confuse intensity with love. Now I understand that love is often quite competence. People doing what they said again and again. Occasionally, a former colleague would mention Nia's name in passing, and the air would tighten briefly. I did not pretend indifference. I acknowledged the discomfort, then let it pass. Avoiding memory does not erase it. Integrating memory does. I kept one copy of the divorce decree in a locked drawer, not out of obsession, but because documentation matters. I kept a small folder of evidence hashes too, stored away, because a professional in me respects closure through records. But I did not reread them. I did not revisit the texts. I did not need to reopen the wound to prove it was real. The scar existed. That was enough. I think about how the story could have ended differently if I had confronted earlier, if I had demanded counseling, if I had refused to accept the slow slide into disrespect. Maybe it would have ended anyway. Maybe it would have ended sooner. I cannot change those branches. I can only change what I do with the lesson. The lesson is not trust no one. The lesson is trust yourself. When the pattern breaks, when your instincts whisper, you listen and you investigate, not to punish, but to protect. I used to believe love required ignoring discomfort. Now I believe love requires honesty, including honesty with yourself. That belief has made my life calmer, not colder. On the anniversary of the gala, I did not mark the date. I noticed it only because my therapist asked how I felt around that season. I told her the truth. The memory no longer stung every day. It was simply a chapter. I drove to the coast that weekend, parked near a quiet beach, and walked along the waterline with my hands in my pockets. The wind was sharp, and gulls circled above, indifferent to human heartbreak. I thought about how people chase status like it can save them from emptiness. Status did not save Nia. It did not even satisfy her. It only gave her a stage for her downfall. I did not feel superior. I felt gratitude that I got out before I became someone I disliked. Now, when I lie down at night, the bed is not a battlefield. It is just a bed. The phone on my nightstand is face down, not because I am hiding it, but because I do not need it to glow in the dark to feel connected to anything. I still wake sometimes before dawn, habit lingering, and I do what I always do when my mind starts sprinting. I breathe slowly, count to 10, then remind myself I am safe. In the morning, I make coffee, open my journal, and write one honest sentence. That practice keeps me grounded. A life does not rebuild itself through one grand gesture. It rebuilds through daily choices that honor your dignity. If there is a moral here, it is simple and unglamorous. Pay attention to small shifts. Respect your own discomfort. Do not trade peace for someone else's convenience. Do not mistake quiet endurance for love if endurance is erasing you. I did not win the war I wanted. I survived a collapse I did not choose, and I rebuilt without begging for anyone's permission. The rain still comes. The world still moves. My work still brings difficult truths. But my home is steady, my mind is clearer, and my future is mine to shape without someone else's secret script. If this story kept you locked in, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because the next one is even wilder. And comment on your location for a chance to get a dedicated story shout-out for the top mentioned city. The end.